Welcome, everyone. This is distance and blended learning basics for Minnesota adult education. Just a reminder that this entire first session is content that is very specific to Minnesota. So if you are not working or volunteering in a Minnesota program, I would recommend checking out either of the other fantastic sessions being offered during this time slot because we are pretty much just going to be talking about Minnesota policies and procedures. This session is for you if you are a staff member working in a Minnesota adult education program and you are involved with any aspect of distance learning, whether that's teaching, providing orientation, entering hours in SID, any of that. This session is for you. The CEUs are a little bit different today. Just to be clear, when you submit the evaluation for the event, that evaluation that is linked on the event flyer, that is going to give you general CEUs. So either 4.5 CEUs for the entire day or 2 CEUs for part of the day. To verify that you have completed this required training for Minnesota adult education staff, you're going to need to stay until the end of each session and fill out an attendance form. And then we will be checking that attendance form and also the Zoom attendance report just to verify that everybody attended the sessions that they needed to attend. And then you will get a separate document. It won't be a CEU certificate because we're not going to give you double CEUs for the event, but you'll get a separate document just verifying that you have completed this required training. And then your manager can add that to your staff profile in SID. If you have any questions, please use the chat or raise your hand throughout the session. And we're happy to answer them as best we can. So we're just going to dive in and get started. Our objectives for this first session are to explain what distance learning means in the specific context of Minnesota adult education, be able to connect distance learning to other components of distance education, which is a broader term. Be sure that everybody is very, very clear on the difference between contact hours and distance learning proxy hours. And then just for you to be able to demonstrate working knowledge of Minnesota adult education policies and procedures related to distance learning proxy hours, distance learning platforms, teacher-created courses, and TVM lessons. And I'm sorry, Astrid, I was supposed to stop talking and let you. And so I'll let you take it from here.
That is just fine, Elizabeth. Just to should we maybe just do, I know that hopefully everyone was in the opening session, but if they weren't, just a quick introduction of the presenter team that will be guiding you through DL Basics here today. I'll be with you for this first session. My name's Astrid Liden, and I'm with the state adult education team at Minnesota Department of Ed. And my specific role is the professional development specialist. So I work really closely with the team at Literacy Minnesota and Atlas and the other support network providers. And I sit on the distance learning advisory team. And then Elizabeth and Adam are really your primary presenters here today and the creators of this session. So Elizabeth and Adam, do you want to just talk a little bit about your roles?
Sure. I work full-time at Literacy Minnesota as a member of the statewide digital learning team. So I get to support teachers all over the state with everything related to distance and digital learning.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Kieffer. I'm a teacher at the Hub Center in St. Paul, and then I'm also on the digital learning team. Nice to see you.
Great, thanks. So we're really excited to have you all here today. I see lot of familiar names in the participant list and some new folks as well. So we want to kick off today just to hear a little bit about what you already know about distance learning. So you can use the chat. We're also a fairly small group, and so we'd welcome you to raise your hand and share questions or comments throughout the session as well. So what do you already know, and what are some examples of distance learning that you've observed at your site? So, see someone, I would encourage you, the E535098, if you want to go ahead and change your name so we know who you are. That person is using my English lab. Teresa says her learners are participating in learning from any location online using approved platforms. Others chiming in with different distance learning platforms that they are using. Polly's doing HighFlex learning in addition to DL platforms. That's great. Yeah. Edric says distance learning has exponentially increased over the past 5 years. Teresa's also doing HighFlex, which we'll talk a little bit more later in the sessions. Nick's mentioning the flexibility with distance learning. So if learners are needing to work or take care of family members, a lot of flexibility. Shelley's using a variety of different distance learning platforms. So it sounds like a lot of you are already engaged with distance learning in some way at your programs. Others, maybe this is new to you, and you'll have a chance to hear lots of examples from participants and from Elizabeth and Adam. And Adam mentions a couple teachers at the site assigning TVM lessons. Okay, great. Well, lots of different examples, and we want to start by doing some work to clarify just some definitions. And we're going to start with the National Reporting System definition of distance education. So the National Reporting System is our federal accountability system. So at our state level, every year we use the NRS and reports data about students participating in adult education in Minnesota. And there are a lot of different definitions that are used to categorize the students and the learning that is happening in states. So I'm going to start just by reading this NRS definition that we are starting with and using for reporting purposes. So according to the NRS, distance education is a formal learning activity where students and instructors are separated by geography, time, or both for the majority of the instructional period. Distance learning materials are delivered through a variety of media, including, but not limited to, print, audio recording, videotape, broadcasts, computer software, web-based programs, or other online technology. And teachers support distance learners through communication by mail, telephone, email, or online technologies and software. So let's go to the next slide here. And we're going to take a little time here to analyze this definition a bit. So what stands out to you in this definition? And does anything surprise you or seem different from what you've experienced at your site? And again, I would encourage you, if you'd like to raise your hand. We'd love to hear from folks as well if you'd like to chime in. Yeah, Becky's noting she's surprised to see mail. Yes, this definition has been in place for a number of years now. So there are parts of it that feel a little outdated, right? Mail, videotape. I doubt that many, if any of you, are sending VHS tapes back and forth at this point with your learners. What else stands out? One thing that stands out to me is just the importance of teachers still, right? It's even though learners may be accessing instruction through a variety of methods, teachers still have a really important role in supporting distance learners. Emily's noting geography or time, and we're going to dig into that a little bit here in a bit as we talk about our Minnesota specific definition. Anything else that stands out to you? Okay. Elizabeth, let's talk a little bit about the broad umbrella term of distance education and how we're using different definitions here in Minnesota.
Sure. So that NRS definition, I had a little too much fun with umbrella and umbrella term and Canva. Um, so, but I was just hoping to really make it clear to folks that the NRS definition of distance education is much broader than the specific definition of distance learning that we use in Minnesota. So distance education, we do have all four of these components in Minnesota adult education. But distance learning is going to be kind of a subcategory of distance education. So we have distance learning, which is always asynchronous. We also have a lot of remote synchronous learning, so your Zoom and Google Meet classes. Digital learning using technology obviously is very important in a lot of distance learning, but it is possible to implement distance learning in like a county jail or a correctional setting or other contexts where maybe you don't have very much or even any technology. Um, and then another really important component of distance education is access, both access in terms of offering distance learning opportunities expands access to education for everyone. And we want to make sure that distance learning is accessible to everyone. So we are providing opportunities to learners at all levels, in all types of classes, in all types of settings. Again, forgive me if I took the metaphor a little too far, but just as we use umbrellas to keep us dry in the rain, we're offering distance education to extend opportunities for learning and to support learner success. In a lot of programs, and I've been there, distance learning hours, like it's all about like, let's get more hours that we can put in SID. And yes, hours are really important. But ultimately, it's not just about getting more hours, it's about supporting learners in meeting their goals. It does get kind of confusing sometimes because all of these four components are really interrelated and overlapping. Distance learning often, but not always, involves the use of online platforms or tools, digital learning. This is especially obvious when we're talking about online DL platforms like Ellie, MobyMax, Edmentum, ReadWorks, and so on. We can also use learning management systems such as Google Classroom or Canvas. Those learning management systems are not distance learning platforms in and of themselves, but they do serve as a digital home base for you to share resources with learners and for you to post distance learning assignments, whether it's an assignment on an external platform like Ellie or ReadWorks, or whether it's your own distance learning TVM lesson or teacher-created course that you've made for your learners. Another example, though, I mentioned jails or correctional facilities before. Learners in those settings may not be able to participate in online synchronous classes, and they probably don't have access to any technology outside of class time. but they can still participate in distance learning. Their teacher could, for example, create paper-based TBM lessons that they could complete in their living areas on days when it isn't possible to attend class in person. Astrid, I'll let you talk about this example.
Okay, let's look at another example where we have a variety of different modalities being used. So in this example, a learner is enrolled in a HighFlex class, and we saw in the chat that some of you are engaged in HighFlex instruction. So most days, this student attends class in person. However, if their children are sick or don't have school, they can join the class online from home using their smartphone. So again, this is really getting at that access piece, and as we said in the opening session, like a lot of choice and flexibility for the learner. In between those class meetings, the learner works on MoMeBacks on their smartphone. And then over weekends or long school breaks, the learner also works on paper packets of ReadWorks passages and quizzes provided by their teacher. So in this example, which components of distance education are present in this HighFlex class with MoMeBacks and ReadWorks? So take a look at the options and let us know which components are there. And then I see your question, Becky. We'll come back to it. I'm gonna get a clarification on it. We'll make sure we get that answered. I see most folks are saying E, all of the above. Do we have someone who's willing to unmute and talk us through where you're seeing these different components in this example? And raise your hand. I'd love to hear your voices. Where do you see these components in this example? Any hands raised, Elizabeth?
Not seeing any hands raised, but yeah, you're all correct.
Yep. No one? Okay, I'll talk through it. But like I said, we would love to hear from you as well in this session. So the distance learning component, you with the distance learning platforms, MoMeBacks and ReadWorks, we see distance learning happening. Remote synchronous learning is happening through that option to join the class online. Digital learning, students are using technology, their phones, and D, that is access as well, providing access through options to attend virtually and to access instruction through the platforms. And I see Teresa, yes, thank you for chiming in with your rationale for that answer. I want to go back to Becky had a question. I'm wondering, Becky, would you be willing to unmute and just clarify a little bit what your question is? I'm not sure I completely understand what you're asking. Just unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I am or getting an echo. Are you in the room with another colleague?
No. Sorry. Oh goodness. I'm trying to turn it off. It's not going off.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and mute? Maybe would you mind just typing in a little bit more detail into your questions so we can make sure we get that answered for you?
Okay. Can you hear me now better?
Oh, yes, that is much better. Thanks, Becky.
Can you hear me now better?
We can hear you. Yeah. So can you let us know what your question is about counting hours?
Okay. If you have a face-to-face class and
Yep.
the student is sick and he or she says, "Can I join on my phone?"
Yep.
Can you count those as, regular student attendance hours or not? I mean, they're
Yes.
attending in class, they're on the phone. This is some of what we did during 2020.
Mm-hmm. So they're participating in the class, but they're just doing it virtually through their phone. Is that right?
Right. So
Yeah.
I didn't know if that could be counted or no, because this is designated as an in class, but the participation and the learning, the potential is the same as face to face.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but all of your hours in a high flex class are counted as contact hours. So even if you haven't designated that class as high flex in SID, if you have a student participating virtually in the activities, yes, you can count those hours. And yes, it's synchronous hours. Thanks
Thank
for that.
you.
Yeah, thanks for that
Because I
question,
have
Becky.
students that are joining by phone during their lunch break at work or their eating breaks, and I didn't think we could count it.
Yeah, I mean, technically you are offering a high flex option then if students have the ability to join virtually.
Cool.
So thanks for that question.
Thank you for answering.
Okay. I'll turn things over to Elizabeth.
So now that we've discussed kind of the broader meaning of distance education, we're really going to be focusing in on distance learning. That's going to be the focus of the rest of this session and especially session 2 today also. We will also be discussing digital learning more during session 3 and access to distance learning in sessions 3 and 4. So distance learning is kind of a confusing term because it's really not determined by the location of the learners and the teachers in Minnesota. For example, when I taught in a multi-level program where we had like just kind of open drop-in learners could come and use the computers in the classroom, I might be working with some learners at a table in the classroom and then have somebody else in the same room working on Khan Academy or something on a computer, doing something totally different. So those learners that I was working with at the table I'm going to be counting that attendance as contact hours. That's synchronous time. But that learner working on the computer on Khan Academy on something totally different, I'm not going to count that as contact hours. We're just going to pull the hours report from Khan Academy and count that time as distance learning time because it's asynchronous. They're working on it while I'm doing something else. I'll check their work and give them feedback at a later time, but it's asynchronous. It's considered distance learning though because because of the asynchronous nature of it, where there's really no distance, but it's still considered distance learning. What matters is the time. So anything that is distance learning in Minnesota adult education is where the learner is working independently. And they're still getting feedback, they're still getting support from their teacher, but it's just not happening at the same time. So just again, really, really important to be clear on that point. It can get a little fuzzy sometimes if you have drop-in programming or you have centers where learners are rotating and doing different activities, and maybe a distance learning platform is one of those centers in the classroom. Or other contexts where you might have learners physically close to you, but they're working on a TVM lesson or a distance learning platform or something else that is asynchronous. Even though there's not really any distance involved, it's going to be counted as distance learning. Synchronous learning, though, those learners who are joining class on their phone, or those learners who are nowhere near you physically, they could be in another county across the state, potentially. If you're in Google Meet together, you're talking and interacting all at the same time, that is counted as contact hours because it's synchronous. Okay. Let us know if you have questions. I realize it's not ideal terminology, but that's what we use. So this chart kind of lays it out a little more clearly. So we have contact hours, which can be either in-person instruction where you are in the same room, or it can be remote instruction over Zoom or Google Meet or something like that. And then we have 3 different pathways for distance learning, and I'll let Astrid talk a little more about this.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And I just want to pause for a moment. Any questions so far about that distinction between the synchronous and asynchronous instruction? I want to make sure that everyone walks away today with these terms and definitions clear in their minds. So don't hesitate to chime in with the chat or raise your hand if you want to ask questions. So with our distance learning proxy hours, that asynchronous instruction, there are 3 different ways that students can participate in this asynchronous instruction. One way is by engaging with an approved distance learning platform. Another is by participating in an approved teacher-created course in a learning management system like Google Classroom or Canvas. And then the third option is by completing lessons that have been created under the teacher verification model. So all 3 of those activities should be counted as distance learning proxy hours. So let's go to the next slide and just look a little bit more closely at what these different options involve. So with the platform option, these platforms could be online or paper-based. So for example, I know a number of you mentioned ReadWorks. So there is the option to print out those readings and give them to students on paper. So that would be an example of a paper-based distance learning platform. You might be using other things. I saw in the chat earlier, Khan Academy, Edmentum, working with those online. These can either be time on task. So that is where the platform is actually tracking the amount of time that students are spending in that platform. And those are the hours that get reported. The other model is something called unit completion or learner mastery, where each unit counts for a specific amount of time. So if a student completes that unit to a satisfactory degree, they earn that amount of time. Elizabeth, I see there's a question here about some of the platforms that have materials that can be used asynchronously or synchronously. And as Elizabeth notes in the chat, you need to be just very careful about how you are tracking your attendance so you're not double counting the time. So Elizabeth, do you want to say anything more about how you've done that in the past?
Yeah, so as Adam is saying in the chat, it's often you have to be really careful if you are using distance learning platforms during your regular class time. It can be a really good practice to get learners familiar with the platform, familiar with navigating, and feeling really comfortable how to use it. there are really good reasons to use platforms during class time, but you just have to be careful not to double count the hours. Most platforms, you can't really tell from the hours reports if the learner was on the platform during class or on the platform at another time. So what I recommend is just if you are using a platform during your class time, when you take attendance for your class, you just use that drop down in SID as if everybody left early. So if you were using it for 15 minutes, everybody left class 15 minutes early or half an hour early or whatever chunk of time. That way you're not counting that in your contact hours, but you'll still get that time in your as your distance learning proxy hours for that platform.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's really helpful to have that example. And good questions and questions, folks. So another option then is, if you want to go back, the teacher created courses. So these are going to always be online in a learning management system. And you would apply to have your course approved. And depending on how the course is set up, this could either be time on task, where the learning management system is tracking that student time, or unit completion. And then finally, the most recent option we have here in Minnesota is the teacher verification model lessons. So this is an option where a teacher is certified to develop and assign asynchronous lessons to their students. And once this teacher has verified student completion of those lessons, they are able to assign a number of proxy hours. And these lessons can be online or paper-based. We've seen great examples of both, and this has been a model that has been particularly useful in correctional settings where students can't access technology always, and teachers are able to use a teacher verification model lesson. Okay, I'm going to hand it back to Elizabeth to talk more about distance learning platforms. And do you want to talk a little bit about the notes document that you just
Yeah,
put in
I'm
the
so
chat?
sorry. If you checked the participant folder for this session, you would have seen a Google Doc version of this document. So whichever format is easier for you, if you want to download the Microsoft Word version or make a copy of the Google Doc for yourself. That just has all the links that we're going to be sharing and some screenshots of important slides, just as a resource for yourself. And if you want to add your own notes on it, feel free. This is purely optional. There's no need to turn it in or submit it to anyone. So moving on just a little bit more about distance learning platforms. This is by far the most common way for learners to earn distance learning hours in Minnesota. As mentioned in the opening session, you have to choose an approved platform in order to enter that time in SID. And all of the approved platforms for Minnesota adult education are listed on the distance and digital learning website. And I'll just drop that link in the chat for you one more time. Oh, Astrid did it. Thank you, Astrid. So you can go to our library page and find platforms listed alphabetically, or you can use that search function. Something else to know is that platforms usually are online. The majority of them will be digital platforms, but there are some paper-based options. So ReadWorks, Common Lit, Marshall Reading Program are probably the top three most commonly used paper-based options. If you use News ELA and Read Theory, those platforms are mostly digital, but they do have a few principal options that may be more limited if you're using the free version of the platform. But if you have a paid subscription, there might be more options that you can easily print. And also Putting English to Work is a platform that has printable worksheets that you can provide to learners. Astrid has mentioned before, we have different ways of counting time for platforms. Astrid, I'll let you add a little bit more and I'll chat out this spreadsheet link. Oh, you got it. Thanks. Sorry.
Yes, sorry. Okay. Just getting unmuted here. So yes, as I mentioned, there are two different options. And with the time on task option, we use the clock time generated by the platform multiplied by 1.25. You can use the proxy hour formula spreadsheet that's in the chat to calculate that time. The rationale for that extra time is just to account for that extra teacher time and time that might not be counted by the platform itself that goes into that instruction. So this option is only used for online platforms that are tracking student time. And over the past number of years, we've seen more and more platforms that are able to track this time on task. The unit completion model is different in the sense that students are completing the same activity and everyone earns the same amount of time, whether it takes them 15 minutes to complete it or 2 hours to complete it. These platforms have had a certain amount of time, sort of the average amount of time that we expect it would take a student to complete that unit assigned to them. So if a student satisfactorily completes that, they earn that amount of time. And you can find that time on the distance learning website for each of those options. And as Elizabeth's showing here, when in doubt, check the website. It shows us which the number of proxy hours for the unit completion options. And Elizabeth, you want to go back just for a minute to that, the one before it. So all of the paper-based options that we have use that unit completion model, obviously because we can't electronically track the time that students are spending on those. And then a handful of our online options also use that unit completion model. So what if you want to use something that's not listed on the website, Elizabeth, then what?
So first of all, please explore the website first. We have a ton of platforms, dozens, that already are approved, and there's no need for you to submit an application. But if you are in a context where you truly cannot find what you need, you can't find something that's going to work, you can submit an application to have a new platform approved. And those applications are available on the distance learning website on that policies and procedures page. We have a drop down for DL platform approval process and application. So we'll just pause here for a minute and take any questions that you might have about distance learning platforms.
Again, you can put your question in the chat or also feel free to unmute if you've got a longer question or want to ask about a specific situation. This is your chance to get anything you wondered about, you're a little unsure, get all those questions answered.
So I think in the interest of time, oh, yes, we are going to get to TVM in just a moment. So yeah, we'll go ahead and move along. But if questions come up, be sure to put them in the chat as we're talking.
Okay, so let's talk a little more about teacher-created courses. This option became available in 2020. We kind of fast-tracked it when So many programs were closed during the pandemic, and it's been growing in popularity. As I mentioned in the opening session, this has been a really good option for programs that are offering career-focused courses, and they want to develop materials specific to that content. So teacher-created courses must be in a learning management system. So some of those ones that you may be using in your program or have heard of: Google Classroom, Canvas, Schoology, D2L. Courses must be at least 12 lessons, totaling 20 proxy hours or more. And I just want to emphasize that, make sure that people are understanding the difference between this option for an actual a course with a set syllabus, lessons outlined for a period of time, versus a teacher verification model, which is frequently used more for one-off lessons. The teacher-created courses can be either time on task or unit completion, depending on your learning management system and what's going to work best. When you've created a course, the next step is to submit an application to have that course approved for distance learning proxy hours. And again, this is where you would find that form on the website. Elizabeth has put a link in the chat. Once you submit that form, the distance learning team will review your course and review the details in that application, and will either get back to you with questions if there are additional details that are needed, and then they'll evaluate it for approval. I'll pause there. Before we go to TVM, any questions about teacher-created courses? Anyone in the session who's created or used a teacher-created course for distance learning? Is that familiar to anyone? Okay, Elizabeth, tell us about TVM.
All right, so TVM, shortly after teacher-created courses were approved in 2020, we rolled out TVM in 2021. This is the only distance learning pathway where the teacher is the one who needs to be certified instead of the content. If teachers are interested in becoming TVM certified, the process is to complete the TVM module of the Distance and Blended Learning Basics in Canvas, submit a sample TVM lesson, and then complete a one-on-one coaching call with a member of the distance learning team. We are not going to be covering TVM in depth today. This is not a TVM certification opportunity. That's something that's optional and extra only if that is going to be useful to you in your teaching practice. TVM lessons can be online, they can be digital, or they can be paper-based, or maybe you use a combination in the same lesson. A downside to using them is that they tend to be pretty time intensive for the teacher to create all the lessons, but then I think that's really worth it because it gives you so much more flexibility to create really customized lessons that fit your learners and your context. I know when I was teaching pre-2021 and I didn't have the TVM option, sometimes it was frustrating because I was trying to find just the right thing on Khan Academy or Edmentum or some other platform, but nothing was really quite right what my students needed or what I was teaching in class. And so this really lets you make something that fits your situation. TVM lessons are always unit completion. So everyone who completes the same TVM lesson is going to get the same number of distance learning hours in SID. And TVM lessons have some additional record keeping requirements, such as a TVM lesson log. And you'll learn all about those extra requirements if you complete the TVM module in the Canvas course. So you can find a lot more information about TVM and some frequently asked questions on this page that Astrid just chatted out. Becky, I hope that answered your question about how you become certified. You want to check out that additional module of the Canvas course. Any questions at this point before we dive into SID? All right. So I'll toss this to Astrid and Adam to talk about SID.
Okay. So we want to make sure that everyone is well versed in how you're going to record your proxy hours. So let's talk about 5 key things to remember. So first of all, your distance learning proxy hours, so that asynchronous time, must be entered in separate classes from your synchronous contact hours. So you never are going to be entering the distance learning proxy hours and the contact hours in the same SID class. So that means your program is going to need to create separate SID classes for each DL platform that's being used, each teacher created course, or for each TVM certified teacher. Those hours are counted separately. It's also really important that those DL classes get named correctly. So the naming convention that we use is DL plus the platform name, so Burlington English, LE, etc., and the word proxy hours. The TVM and teacher created course options are also in the drop-down menu for distance learning program in SID. And teachers using TVM should have a separate TVM class for each one of their in-person classes or subjects that they teach. So that, for example, could be TVM hours for GED prep or TVM hours for advanced ESL. And this, I'll just emphasize again, like making sure that classes are named correctly, categorized correctly is really going to support accurate reporting in your program, both locally and then when we're looking at information statewide, making sure that we're actually looking at what we think we're looking at. 3, we want to make sure that you're setting up your distance learning classes correctly. So in SID, when you set up your classes, you're going to select distance learning for the student hour type. This is very important because classes with the student hour type are not going to appear on the hotline website. So when folks are searching for classes on the hotline, they're only going to be seeing classes that have synchronous options. And then in most cases, you're going to select lab for the attendance format. And this allows you to enter up to 30 hours on one day per learner, because most likely you're going to be entering these proxy hours in bulk after a certain period of time. And that format will allow you to do that. So it's really best practice that you're entering hours at least monthly for your distance learning hours. Some programs enter hours more often, maybe every week or every 2 weeks. And just a reminder that SID does have that 1 month lockdown for NRS hours. So you can only enter hours for the current month and the previous month. So another reason to keep up to date with entering your DL proxy hours. And Laura's chiming in the chat that Jenny just found that she had incorrectly marked their North Star distance learning class as asynchronous. instruction, but one-to-one instead of distance learning. I'm not entirely following that, Laura. Let's see.
Maybe for the student hour type,
Oh, okay.
because
Yeah.
there are multiple
Yeah.
downs when you're setting up that class.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So the student hour type didn't match the class interaction. Yeah. Great. Thank you. And then finally, if you have any questions, use the SID Help Center. And Elizabeth, if you want to put that in the chat, there is a series of orientation videos, great search function. They're really, really helpful. And then if you have any questions, you can email Jenny and Mary. They are very quick to respond, super helpful. And yes, speaking of Jenny, this is how you can get in touch with them. And yes, she was doing, as we were preparing for the Distance Learning Institute and the opening session, we were digging in and looking at some of how the courses had been categorized. And as Laura mentioned, she found some errors in how they had been labeled. So just making sure that folks are labeling everything correctly. Let's pause here to see if there are any questions about SID and how you are logging your distance learning proxy hours. Make sure that's clear to everyone. And we are just about at time, and I want to open up to questions about anything that we have covered today. Again, our goal is that you walk away from the session feeling really confident in your understanding about how the definitions work here in Minnesota, the different options that you have available, and then how to track those hours. Any questions?
I want to jump in real quick and just say one quick thing about SID. If you're not a person who touches SID, or you're not like your SID person, but you feel like your SID person at your program might benefit from seeing some of this stuff on some of these resources, feel free to share it with them. They probably already know, but it maybe wouldn't hurt. And of course, they can always reach out to Jenny and Mary or the DL team, and we'll point them in the right direction too.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Elizabeth then to wrap us up with this first session.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like we kind of dumped a ton of content on you. Just as a reminder, we do need you to complete this attendance Google form right now that Astrid is going to drop in the chat. This is what we'll check this form, and we'll also cross-check it against the Zoom attendance report to make sure that you get your verification of having completed this training. And then since we just dumped so much information on you, this is optional, but I'm going to send you a little micro-learning follow-up next week or in the coming month. And that will come from this microlearning at 7taps.com. It's a really cool platform that we're kind of experimenting with this year. If you've done the LE training, those quizzes were on this platform. It's really nice and interactive and very easy to use. So go ahead and open that email. If you see something from 7taps, it's legitimate. And it'll just be like a little mini slide deck that you can click through and answer some questions just to kind of counteract the forgetting or the information dump, just to remind you of some important things to know. And we will be here for 3 more minutes if you have any questions. And then, of course, if you are instructional staff or someone who supervises instructional staff, hopefully we'll see you in sessions 2, 3, and 4 today.
I'm going to stop the recording now so people can ask questions freely.